At our annual Easter brunch, my father, Alfred, announced that I would be paying off my brother's massive debts to save the family name. My mother just smiled, but their smug confidence shattered when I calmly stood up, dropped my keys, and set a trap that would dismantle the financial empire they had built, using my money. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The call came on a Tuesday while I was battling the flu. I was buried under a fortress of tissues on my sofa, laptop balanced precariously on my knees, trying to finalize a quarterly risk assessment for my firm. Every number on the screen blurred into a gray haze. I was 42, a senior financial analyst, and I was utterly exhausted. My head pounded, my throat felt like sandpaper, and the last thing I wanted was a video call from my brother, Stephen. But his face popped up on my phone, and the familiar, Pavlovian anxiety tightened my chest. I declined the video and hit the audio-only option. "Livy," he chirped, his voice offensively bright, "you look terrible." "Thanks, Stephen, I feel terrible," I croaked, pulling a blanket tighter. "What's up? I'm in the middle of it." I know, always busy." "The workhorse, that's you," he said, a laugh in his voice that always set my teeth on edge. "Listen, I've got the most incredible news. You're going to love this." I braced myself. Stephen's incredible news almost always preceded a request for a bridge loan or a small investment in one of his perpetually failing ventures. At 36, he was a self-proclaimed artist manager, a title that seemed to involve a lot of late-night parties and very few actual clients. "It's about the Starlight Tour, Liv. It's expanding. We're talking international, Olivia. But we've hit a small snag with the venue deposits in London." I closed my eyes. The Starlight Tour was his latest obsession, a string of concerts for an indie band I'd never heard of. "Snag," I repeated, my voice flat. "Define snag, Stephen." "It's just boring logistics, paperwork you wouldn't understand," he deflected, his breezy tone faltering. "Look, I just need to move some things around. But the point is, Mom and Dad are so excited. They said we have to talk about it at Easter brunch. It's a full family strategy session." A cold dread cut through my fever-induced fog. A family strategy session was code. It meant I was the strategy. "Stephen, I told you last time I'm not." "Don't be like that, Liv," he cut in, his voice hardening. "This is for the family. You know how important the family name is to Dad. This is bigger than just me. Anyway, I gotta run. Mom's making me pick up the good-for-nothing centerpiece. See you Sunday, don't be late." The line clicked dead. I stared at the phone, the silence in my apartment suddenly feeling heavy and oppressive. He hadn't even asked for money. Not directly. That was worse. It meant the request was so big he needed backup. He was bringing in our parents. I slumped back against the cushions, the spreadsheet on my laptop forgot. My father, Alfred, a retired ethics professor, had built his entire identity around concepts of legacy and sacrifice. My mother, Helen, a former art curator, cared only for the aesthetics of success, the beautiful home, the impressive social circle, the talented children. I was the financial engine that made their performance possible. Stephen was the ornamental hood ornament. They had been a unit, the three of them, for my entire life, and I had been the bank. I thought of the brunch. The pristine white table linen, the gleaming silverware, the polite, cutting smiles. I thought of the snag Stephen had mentioned and the family strategy session that was clearly an ambush. For 20 years, I had been the responsible one, the one who sacrificed, the one who paid. And as I sat there, sick and alone, a cold, clear thought surfaced, sharper than any headache. The betrayal wasn't that they were going to ask. The betrayal was that they had no doubt I would say yes. The rest of the week was a blur of work and antibiotics. By Thursday, my fever had broken, but the knot of dread in my stomach remained. I tried to call my mother, hoping to gauge the temperature of the water I was about to be thrown into. "Olivia, darling," Helen answered, her voice sounding like tinkling crystal. Are you feeling better? You sounded simply dreadful on Tuesday. Much better, thanks, Mom. Just wanted to check in, see if you need me to bring anything on Sunday. Oh, just your lovely self, she trilled. It's all handled. We're just so looking forward to it. Your father is especially eager to see you. We have such wonderful things to discuss. Wonderful things, I repeated, my grip tightening on the phone. Right. Like Stephen's tour. There was a half-second pause. It was so brief, anyone else would have missed it. But I had spent a lifetime decoding my mother's silences. Among other things, she said, her voice dropping into a more serious, conspiratorial tone. Your brother? Well, he's on the cusp of something truly important, Olivia. Something that will elevate this whole family. We all need to be supportive, you know. We all have a part to play. A part to play, I said, the words tasting like ash. And what part is that, Mom? Oh, darling, let's not get into boring details over the phone, she laughed, a brittle, dismissive sound. That's what brunch is for. Just be ready to be a team player. Your father has a wonderful toast prepared about family unity. It's going to be a beautiful day. She hung up before I could reply. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the muted gray of my granite countertop. Be a team player. Family unity. The coded language was suffocating. They weren't just asking, they were preemptively blaming me for any disunity my refusal might cause. I spent Friday finalizing my reports, my mind working on two separate tracks. One track processed market fluctuations and asset allocations. The other, the colder, more methodical one, began to run calculations on my family. For 2 decades, I had been the fixer. When my father's pension was mismanaged, I fixed it by quietly supplementing their income. When Stephen's first startup, a bespoke shoelace company, failed, I paid off his disgruntled suppliers. When they wanted a more impressive home, I bought a sprawling colonial in their neighborhood, put the deed in my name for tax purposes, and let them live there rent-free as the caretakers. It was a fiction we all agreed to. They saw my success not as my success, but as the family's shared resource pool. I was the high-performing asset, and they were the board of directors, voting on how to spend the dividends. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I was the one who wrote the reports. I was the one who read the fine print. I was the one who controlled the accounts. On Saturday, the day before Easter, I didn't go shopping for a pastel-colored dress. I didn't bake a lemon cake. Instead, I spent 2 hours on the phone with my personal lawyer and another 3 hours online with my bank, my leasing agent, and my brokerage firm. I wasn't just getting into boring details. I was pulling every single thread, checking every number, and printing every last document. As I compiled the statements, a new feeling began to replace the dread, a cold, hard anger. The numbers didn't lie. The supplemental income had become their entire lifestyle. The car lease, the club memberships, the vacation fund they dipped into monthly, it was all me. I printed the final statement for the joint savings account, the vacation fund. I saw the withdrawals, $2,000 for tour promotion, $3,500 for artist wardrobe, $1,800 for client dinners. Stephen had been draining it for months, and my parents had clearly been letting him. They weren't just planning an ambush. They were already robbing the bank while I was sick in bed. I placed the thick stack of papers into my briefcase, right next to the keys to my father's car and the house he thought was his. The betrayal was worse than I could have imagined, and the family unity, toast, was going to be anything but beautiful. To understand the Easter brunch, you have to understand my father, Alfred. He was a man who spoke in parables, mostly about himself. As a retired professor of ethics, he saw the world as a classroom where he was the only one with the tenure to lecture. His favorite topics were duty, legacy, and sacrifice, concepts he applied exclusively to others, most notably to me. I was his responsible daughter. My entire childhood was an apprenticeship in managing my family's emotional and, later, financial volatility. While other kids were at the mall, I was learning how to read a balance sheet at 15 because my father's investment strategies were anything but. He loved the idea of wealth but was disastrous at acquiring it. Then there was Stephen. Stephen was not responsible. Stephen was brilliant. He was creative. He was the golden child, the one who was destined for greatness, even as he failed upward at every opportunity. My mother, Helen, cultivated this narrative. A former art curator, she treated Stephen like a priceless, volatile painting, one that needed to be protected, funded, and displayed regardless of its actual merit. My role was simple. I was the frame. The sturdy, unassuming, and functional border that made the artwork pop. I was the one who went to a state school, got the boring finance degree, and climbed the corporate ladder, all while sending money home. My first sacrifice was my study abroad program. They needed a new roof. My second was my down payment for a condo in the city. Stephen needed Eid money for a music blog. My third and largest was my future. When my father's final, ethical investment in a friend's company went bust, they were on the verge of losing their home. I was 28. I had just made partner. I bought the new house, the beautiful brick colonial on the Oak Line Street. "We'll put it in your name, Olivia," my father had declared, as if it were his idea. "For legal protection, we will be the stewards of the home." And so I became the owner, and they became the lords of the manor. I subsidized their life, paying the mortgage, the utilities, the lease on Alfred's luxury sedan, and the dues at their country club. I did it because I believed, truly believed, in my father's core lecture: family means sacrifice. The problem with Stephen wasn't just that he was a financial black hole. It was that he was proud of it. His current venture, the Starlight Tour, was just the latest in a string of disasters. He wasn't a manager. He was a con artist in a blazer, convincing young, desperate bands that he had connections. A few months ago, he'd introduced me to the new antagonist in his life, though I didn't see it so clearly then. His name was Marco. He was sleek, older, with a disingenuous smile and a vague profession listed as international financing. Marco was at a family dinner, and I watched him with the practiced eye of an analyst. He was all flattery for my parents and all dismissal for me. "Olivia, a numbers cruncher," he'd laughed, waving a hand. "We don't deal in numbers, do we, Stephen? We deal in vision." He'd spent the rest of the dinner asking pointed questions about our family's assets. Not my assets, our assets. "Alfred, this house is a masterpiece," Marco had purred, looking at my father. "A true family estate." "We believe in legacy," my father had puffed up, taking the credit. I knew instantly that Marco was the source of the new trouble. He was the one who had likely financed Stephen's tour, and now the bill was due. Stephen, cornered and terrified, had run to our parents. And our parents, seeing the family name and their comfortable lifestyle, threatened, had turned to their usual solution. Meh. Driving to brunch on Sunday, I felt a strange, hollow calm. The flu was gone, replaced by a crystalline clarity. My briefcase was on the passenger seat. I wasn't just walking into a family brunch. I was walking into a hostile negotiation. And for the first time in my life, I was the one holding all the cards. They just didn't know it yet. The house looked beautiful. My mother had a gift for aesthetics. I had to give her that. Daffodils and white tulips lined the walkway. Wreaths of faux lavender hung on the double front doors, the doors I had paid for. I parked my modest sedan behind my father's gleaming, dark blue luxury sedan, the one I paid the lease on. I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse and my briefcase, and walked in. "She's here," my mother trilled, sweeping out of the dining room. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere dress that I knew, from a casual glance at a store window, cost over $1,000. "Olivia, darling, you made it. Happy Easter." She kissed the air beside my cheek. "Happy Easter, Mom." The dining room was set for a magazine shoot. The long mahogany table, which I'd bought at an estate sale, was covered in a pristine white runner. My briefcase felt heavy, almost absurd, in this setting of curated perfection. "Olivia, put that ugly thing down," Helen said, eyeing my briefcase with distaste. "You're not at the office." "Just some papers I need to review," I said smoothly, placing it by my chair. My father, Alfred, sat at the head of the table, nursing a glass of sparkling cider. He looked up as I entered, his expression one of polite, professorial interest. "Olivia, good of you to join us." "Dad." Stephen was pacing by the sideboard, already on his second mimosa, his phone in his hand. He looked pale and jittery, his designer suit looking more like a costume than an outfit. He saw me, and his face lit up with a desperate, false brightness. "Livy, you came? Great, we can finally get this sorted." "Get what sorted, Stephen?" I asked, taking my seat. "All in good time," Alfred said, raising a hand. "Let us eat first. Helen, this looks marvelous." The first 20 minutes were a masterclass in passive aggression. We talked about the weather. We talked about my mother's garden club. We talked about a neighbor's tacky new fence. All the while, the real topic hung in the air, thick and unappetizing, like the smell of the overcooked ham. Stephen couldn't sit still. He kept checking his phone, his knee bouncing under the table. My mother kept shooting him little calming smiles, while my father simply ate with slow, deliberate precision, like a man biding his time. I shifted from passive victim to active strategist. I had planned to wait. But seeing them, so comfortable in their conspiracy, I decided to nudge the bee. "So, Stephen," I said, cutting a piece of asparagus. "Tell me more about this snag in London. Is it a problem with the promoter or the venue?" Stephen froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. It's complicated, Liv, it's just financing." "Financing?" I nodded. "I know a little about that. What kind of figures are we talking about? Is it a cash flow issue or a default?" "Olivia, please," my mother interrupted, her smile tightening. "Let's not talk about such grim things, it's Easter." "Right," I said, "my mistake." Alfred dabbed his lips with his napkin. He placed his fork and knife down, parallel to each other on his plate. The performance was about to begin. "Olivia," he started, his voice adopting the familiar, sonorous tone of his Ethics 101 lecture. "Your mother is right, it is Easter, a time for family, a time for renewal, and a time for sacrifice." He looked at me, I looked back, my face neutral. "Your brother," he continued, gesturing to Stephen, "is on the verge of a magnificent success. A success for the entire family, but he has encountered an obstacle." "A snag," I supplied. "A complication," Alfred corrected, his eyes narrowing. "A partner, a financier, has proven to be less than scrupulous. He is making unreasonable demands. He is threatening to dismantle everything Stephen has built. He is threatening this family's good name." "Marco," I said, it wasn't a question. Stephen's head snapped up. "How did you know?" "I'm a financial analyst, Stephen. It's my job to spot the sharks," I said. "So, Marco is calling in his loan. How much?" Stephen looked at his plate. Alfred sighed, a deep, put-upon sigh of a man burdened by the foolishness of the world. "This is not about numbers, Olivia," my father said, his voice rising. "This is about principle. This is about loyalty." He picked up his fork, a heavy, ornate silver piece, and pointed it at me across the table. "Family means sacrifice. You'll be paying your brother's debts, no questions asked." His eyes were hard, imperious. My mother, beside him, just smiled. A calm, satisfied, terrifying smile. It was the smile of someone who had just checked the last item off her list. It was, as the title said, already decided. The whole room was silent. Stephen was watching me, his eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. My mother was beaming. My father held his fork aloft like a gavel. I looked at all of them. The professor of ethics demanding I enable fraud. The curator of beauty who was ugly on the inside. The golden boy who was nothing but brass. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. The investigation was over. The trap was set. I calmly, quietly stood up. The scrape of my chair on the hardwood floor was shockingly loud in the silent room. 3 sets of eyes swiveled to me, their expressions unified in surprise. I was, after all, the one who never broke the script. "Olivia, sit down," my father commanded, his fork still raised. We are in the middle of a discussion. No, I said, my voice clear and steady. It didn't even tremble. You are in the middle of a proclamation. I'm not part of that. I reached into my briefcase, which was resting on my chair, and pulled out a small, leather-bound folder. I didn't open it. Not yet. What is this, Olivia? My mother asked, her smile finally faltering, replaced by a delicate frown of confusion. What are you doing? We're having brunch. We were, I agreed, and now you're demanding I pay off Stephen's debts. No questions asked, so I have just one question: how much? Stephen winced. Liv, it's not like that. How much, Stephen? I repeated, my voice like ice. It's the full amount. Marco wants the full seed money back plus penalties. He's threatening to sue for fraud. And how much is the full amount? $200,000, Stephen whispered, staring at the table. I nodded. It was a staggering, stupid amount of money. I see. It's a pittance to you, Olivia, Alfred boomed, slamming his fork down. The silver clattered against the china. A rounding error. Compared to the reputation of this family, it is nothing. The reputation of this family, I repeated, tasting the words. Whose reputation, Dad? Yours, Mom's, or Stephen's? I looked at Stephen. You didn't just take a loan from Marco, did you? You told him you had assets. You told him the family had backing. You told him about me. Stephen's face went white. He didn't have to answer. Of course you did, I said, more to myself. I turned my gaze back to my father. So this isn't about saving the family name. This is about covering up Stephen's fraud so Marco doesn't come after you. How dare you? Helen gasped, a hand flying to her chest. We are your parents. We have given you everything. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of that statement hung in the air. I almost laughed. Given me everything? Mom, let's talk about that. This was the first reveal, the one I hadn't planned, but which felt so right. I reached down, picked up my briefcase, and placed it on the table, right on top of the ham platter. I unzipped it. I pulled out the first file, the one marked Vacation Fund. Let's start small, I said. This joint account, I opened it for our family trips. In the last 6 months, you've withdrawn, let's see, $28,000. I looked at Stephen. $2,000 for tour promotion. $3,500 for artist wardrobe. Stephen, this account was for Mom and Dad's trip to Italy, not for your imaginary business. How did you? Stephen started. I'm the primary account holder. I get the alerts, I said. I turned to my mother. And you let him, you co-signed the withdrawals. You've been lying to me for months, draining an account you don't even contribute to. Helen's face was pale. It was a loan, Olivia. He's good for it, as soon as the tour. The tour is dead, Mom. It's over. There is no tour. There's just a shark named Marco and a debt of $200,000. My father stood up, his face purple with rage. This is insubordination, Olivia. This is a betrayal of everything we stand for. You are a part of this family, and you will do your duty. Duty, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Let's talk about duty, Dad. I reached back into the briefcase. I pulled out a set of keys. They were attached to a heavy, branded keychain from a luxury car maker. I tossed them onto the table. They landed with a heavy, metallic clink right next to Alfred's plate. Then I guess this house, I said, my voice ringing with a clarity I'd never felt before. This car, and that vacation fund. I paused, letting the words sink in. All going with me. Their smiles didn't just drop, they shattered. My father stared at the keys as if they were a snake. My mother looked from the keys to my face, her eyes wide with dawning, uncomprehending horror. Stephen just looked sick. What are you talking about? My father stammered. That's my car. It's a car leased in my name, Dad, I said, picking up the file marked automotive. A lease I pay $900 a month for, a lease that I am terminating, effective tomorrow morning. I'd suggest you find a bus pass. Olivia, my mother whispered, her voice trembling, don't be cruel. Cruel, I snapped, the ice finally breaking. Cruel is sitting there with your smug smile, having already decided how you're going to spend my money. Cruel is pointing a fork at your daughter, the daughter who has paid for every single thing in this room, and demanding she light $200,000 on fire to protect the family name that he, I pointed at Stephen, so gleefully destroyed. I leaned in, my hands flat on the table. Family means choices, I added, my voice low, and I'm finally making mine. The silence that followed was a vacuum, sucking all the air and color from the room. My father, Alfred, a man who had lectured on moral certainty his entire life, looked utterly, completely lost. He fumbled for his chair and sat down heavily, his eyes still fixed on the car keys. My mother, Helen, was the first to recover. Her shock curdled into a venomous rage. "You wouldn't," she hissed, her voice trembling. "You wouldn't dare. This house, this is our home. You would throw your own parents out on the street." "You're not on the street," I said, my voice cold and analytical. "You're in my asset portfolio, an asset that is currently underperforming." I pulled the final, thickest file from my briefcase, the one marked with the address of the house. "I bought this house when Dad's ethical investments evaporated your retirement. The mortgage, the insurance, the property taxes, all in my name, all paid by me, for 14 years. I opened the file and spun it around for them to see. The deed, the mortgage statements, the property tax receipts, a detailed spreadsheet I had prepared, itemizing every single penny. "You're not stewards of the home, Dad," I said, meeting his gaze. "You're tenants, tenants who have never paid a day of rent." "This is monstrous," Alfred whispered, shaking his head. "To hold this over our heads, to keep a ledger." "The ledger," I said, "is what you call sacrifice. I just call it a bad investment. And Stephen's little snag with Marco, that was the final risk assessment. The family business is insolvent. I'm liquidating my assets." Stephen, who had been silent, finally exploded. "You can't do this," he shouted, standing up so fast his chair toppled over. "Marco will ruin me. He'll tell people. He'll come after you." "Will he?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "What does Marco think you have, Stephen? What assets did you pledge?" I told him about the house," he admitted, his voice cracking. "I told him the family had property that I had equity." "You tried to leverage my house to secure a fraudulent loan," I stat. "Ed, it was incredible. The audacity was almost impressive." "I was going to pay it back," he yelled. "The tour was going to be huge." "There is no tour, Stephen," I snapped. "There's just Marco, and this is where you, my dear family, have miscalculated." I took a deep breath. This was the second, more powerful confrontation. This was the irrefutable proof. "I told you I was on the phone with my lawyer this weekend, but I wasn't just talking to my lawyer. You see, after Marco's little performance at dinner a few months ago, I did what I do best. I ran the numbers on him." A new, colder fear entered the room. Stephen's face went from pale to translucent. "Marco, or as he's known to the SEC, Michael Patroni, isn't an international financier," I said, pulling a single sheet of paper from my bag. "He's a professional predator. He finds desperate, arrogant little fish like you, Stephen, and he invests. But his real business is fraud. He's been investigated 3 times for wire fraud and racketeering." "You're lying," Stephen breathed, but his eyes were wide with terror. "Am I?" I slid the paper across the table. It was a printout of a press release from an old investigation. "He targets the children of wealthy families, cons them, and then, when they default, he blackmails the parents into paying, using their reputation against them. He's not after your $200,000, Stephen. He's after my entire portfolio. You didn't find a shark. You found a whale, and you painted a target on this entire family." My mother looked like she was going to faint. "Oh, Alfred, he threatened us." "No," I said. "He's not a thug. He's smarter. He doesn't threaten. He just collects, and he's counting on you," I looked at my father, "to be so terrified of the family name being embarrassed that you'll force me to pay him to go away." I looked back at Stephen. "And you You just handed him the leverage, you told him about the house, you probably gave him the address. Stephen's silence was his confession. So, here is the new family strategy, I said, my voice hardening. You will not pay Marco. I will not pay Marco. Instead, I've already had my actual lawyer forward this entire file, including your Starlight Tour corporate non-corporate structure and your lovely detailed vacation fund expense report, to the SEC's regional office, flagging it as material related to their ongoing interest in Mr. Patrony. You went to the police, Alfred stammered, horrified. I went to the regulators, I corrected. I'm a financial analyst, Dad. I have a professional and ethical duty to report suspected fraud. Unlike you, I actually practice the ethics I preach. I began to pack my briefcase. The keys, the house file, the car lease. What happens now? Stephen asked, his voice a child's whisper. Now, I said, zipping the bag, Marco has bigger problems than you. He'll be too busy dealing with a federal investigation to worry about your $200,000. He'll cut his losses and disappear. Which also means you, I looked at Stephen, get nothing. The tour is over. The money is gone. But us, Helen whispered, her eyes on the briefcase. The house. I paused at the dining room door. I'm calling a realtor tomorrow. The house will be on the market by Friday. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. The 30 days that followed were a symphony of desperation. The first stage was denial. They didn't pack. My mother called me every day, leaving voicemails that swung wildly between, Olivia, darling, we're ready to forgive you, just stop this silliness, and I can't believe you're doing this to your own mother. The second stage was negotiation. My father, Alfred, requested a formal meeting at a neutral location, a coffee shop. He showed up with a notepad, as if for a dissertation defense. Olivia, he began, I've been reviewing our situation. Your mother and I are willing to compromise. A compromise, I said, sipping my coffee. Yes, we will agree to chastise Stephen for his recklessness. In return, you will, of course, take the house off the market. It's a perfectly logical solution. We remain in the home and you get the apology you seem to require. I stared at him. He genuinely saw this as a negotiation, as if he held any cards at all. Dad, this isn't a situation. It's a consequence. The for sale sign goes up on Friday. That's not a negotiating point, it's a statement of fact. My realtor is arriving at 10 a.m. I suggest you're not there. The third stage was all-out war. They weaponized the only thing they had left, family. They called my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. I received a barrage of calls and texts. How can you do this to Alfred and Helen? She's your mother, Olivia. After all they've sacrificed for you. It all came to a head at what was supposed to be a celebratory dinner. My cousin, Sarah, had just announced her engagement. The entire extended family was gathered at her parents' house. I knew it would be an ambush, but I went anyway. I was tired of hiding. I walked in and the conversation died. I was the pariah, the ungrateful daughter. My Aunt Martha, my father's sister, was the ringleader. Olivia, she said, cornering me by the appetizers. I think you owe your parents an explanation and an apology. I saw them then. Alfred, Helen, and Stephen huddled near the fireplace, looking like a trio of tragic refugees. They were performing victim for the entire family, and they were giving the performance of their lives. This was it, the public showdown they had engineered. An apology for what, Aunt Martha? I asked, my voice calm. For your cruelty, she snapped. Kicking them out of their home, at their age, it's shameful. A circle had formed, everyone was listening. This was the moment. Their home, I said, setting my glass down. That's interesting, because I have the deed, the mortgage, and 14 years of property tax receipts that say it's my home, the one I've paid for. A murmur went through the crowd. I see my father has been selective with the details, I continued, projecting my voice so everyone could hear. Let me fill in the gaps. You all see a poor, retired couple being kicked out by their cruel daughter. I see a pair of adults who have lived rent-free for 14 years, in a luxury home, driving a luxury car, all on my dime. I turn to my parents. Did you tell them that, Dad? Did you tell them about the car lease I'm terminating, or the country club dues I've stopped paying? Alfred's face was chalk white. This is a private family matter, Olivia. No, I countered. You made it a public matter when you decided to ambush me at Easter. You made it public when you sixed Aunt Martha on me. I turned back to my aunt. And did they tell you why I'm kicking them out? Did they tell you about the $200,000 debt Stephen rang up with a known con artist? A debt he tried to secure by illegally leveraging my house. Silence, utter, pin-drop silence. Did they tell you, I said, my voice dropping but gaining an edge, that their family strategy was to point a fork at me and demand I pay it off? No questions asked, to protect the family name. No one spoke, no one moved. The sacrifice my father is so fond of lecturing about? For 20 years, that's been my job. I've been the family bank, the emergency fund. The responsible one you could all count on to clean up the mess, and I'm done. I looked at Stephen, who was trying to blend into the wallpaper. The $200,000, that's gone. I reported his partner to the SEC for fraud. The family name you were so worried about, Stephen, you're lucky you're not being investigated as a co-conspirator. Helen let out a small, strangled sob. You've ruined us. No, I said, my voice softening for the first time, not with pity but with finality. You did this to yourselves. You built a lifestyle on the back of my hard work, and you got so comfortable, you thought it was your right. You thought I was an obligation, not a choice. You thought I was an asset you could command. I picked up my purse. Well, this asset is divesting, the house is being sold, the car is being returned, the accounts are closed. I looked at Alfred, my father, the professor of ethics. Family does mean choices, Dad, and I'm choosing me. I walked out of the party. No one said a word to stop me. I heard my cousin Sarah in the stunned silence whisper, "Oh my God, Olivia paid for all of it." The spell was broken. The public humiliation was complete, not for me, but for them. The narrative they had so carefully crafted for decades, of the dutiful daughter and the sacrificing parents, had just been obliterated by the one thing they never bothered to check: the truth. The house sold in less than a week. It was a cash offer, well over asking, from a young couple who, ironically, worked in tech. I signed the closing papers in my lawyer's office, a sterile, quiet environment that felt worlds away from the emotional chaos of my family. The wire transfer hit my account, and for the first time, the number I saw reflected my wealth, not my family's perceived assets. The downfall of my family, as they had constructed it, was swift and definitive. My father and mother, faced with the hard reality of the 30-day eviction notice, moved into a small, 2-bedroom rental apartment in a complex by the highway. The shock of it, the linoleum floors, the laminate countertops, the polyester blend carpet, was, as my Aunt Martha later reported to me, a profound trauma for my mother, Helen. She had to sell her cashmere and her art books just to make the security deposit. My father, Alfred, took it even harder. His legacy was gone. He was no longer the lord of a grand colonial, but a retiree in a rented apartment. He tried to find work, to lecture again, but the world had moved on. His ethics, it turned out, were not a marketable skill when they weren't being subsidized. And Stephen, as I had predicted, Marco or Michael Patroni, vanished. Once his name was flagged in connection with an active SEC file, he cut all his losses, especially the small fry, high-risk ones like my brother. Stephen was left with nothing. No tour, no money, and no reputation. He had to get a job, a real hourly wage job, at a local music store, stocking shelves and tuning guitars. He now lived in his parents' second bedroom. The reconciliation, if you can call it that, was quiet and came months later. I was in my own condo, reading a book on a Sunday afternoon when my phone rang. It was Stephen. "Liv," he said, his voice small, stripped of all its usual bravado. I got my first paycheck. It's not much, but I wanted I wanted to ask you where I should open a savings account for, rent. There was no apology, not a real one. But in his question, I heard the one thing I had never heard from him before, a genuine admission that he didn't know how to do something, and that I did. I can send you some links, Stephen, I said. Look for a high-yield online account. Low fees. Yeah, okay, thanks, Liv, he paused. The apartment's not so bad. Mom is. She's learning to cook. I met my parents a few weeks after that. Alfred had called not to demand, but to ask if I would join them for coffee. I met them at a chain cafe. My mother looked older, her hands, bare of their usual rings, were wrapped around a paper cup. My father looked smaller. We didn't talk about the house. We didn't talk about the money. We talked about the weather. We talked about my work. They asked questions, and for the first time, they actually listened to the answers. As we were leaving, my father touched my arm. The couple who bought the house, he said, his voice rough. They sent a card. They said the garden you planted in the back, the hydrangeas, they're beautiful this year. I'm glad, I said. Me too, he said. It was good to see you, Olivia. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a perfect, happy ending. It was something more real. It was an adjustment, a new baseline. We were a family, but the terms had been rewritten. The choices were clear, and the sacrifices were no longer mine to make alone. I left them at the cafe and walked out into the sunshine. I was heading to the airport. I had a 2-week vacation booked to Italy, the one I had always wanted to take. And I had paid for it in cash with money that was, finally and completely, my own.